You are listening to the Spiritual Warrior Coach with Barbara Savin, the podcast for discovering how powerful your wisdom, compassion, and courage is. Get ready to join Barbara and her guests as they explore and offer you advice on how to reclaim your power, your energy, and your authentic self. And now, here's the host of the show, Barbara Savin.
Well, thank you for joining me today, and welcome to the Spiritual Warrior Coach podcast. I'm your host, Barbara Savin, and I am here to help you reclaim your power, your energy, and your authentic self. I'm a certified clinical and medical hypnotherapist, Reiki master and teacher, energy healing specialist, life coach, best-selling author of Gentle Energy Touch, the beginner's guide to hands-on healing. You know, I have been helping my clients for over 35 years. And the older I get, the more wisdom seems to come through. So isn't it time that you believe in yourself? You know, your mind is going to provide you with your greatest challenges in life because it's so very, very powerful. So let's use that mind for positive thinking, creating harmony, balance, peace, love, happiness, and anything else that your heart desires. Because one day the world will tap you on your shoulder and say, this is your time to shine. And speaking about shining, I'm going to bring my guest on right now. How are you, Patrick?
Barbara, I'm great, and I'm thrilled to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, let me tell my listeners a little bit about you. Patrick, 50 years old. He's a husband and father of two. He spent 15 years as a sports gambler from 2001 to 2015. And it began innocently enough, but then it progressed to the point where he was committing crimes to feed his addiction. Gambling addiction is hard to recognize, and he was able to keep it hidden for many, many years, lying to his wife and family on a daily basis. And then it all came crashing down in early 2015. He ended up in jail, and his family was left completely devastated. And for the past 7 years, he has been focused on his recovery, rebuilding his marriage. And now he speaks regularly with college students and addicts about this awful disease. And Patrick just finished writing a book and continues to push for more education and awareness when it comes to gambling. Oh, boy, that must have been a tough time for you.
It was
Wow.
rough. It was rough. You know, gambling addiction is one of the more insidious addictions out there because it's such a gradual process. And as you mentioned, it's what I call the hidden addiction because you don't recognize it like you would with, say, an alcoholic or a drug addict. You know, gambling addiction there aren't any visible signs, physical signs. And so it's a gradual process. And for me, it got to the point, like you mentioned right there, where I had exhausted all financial avenues and resources. I had borrowed money from everybody, every family friend and family member I could find. And I resorted to crime to feed my addiction because my addiction had become all consuming with me. And from the time I woke up until the time I went to bed each and every day, it's all I could think about was gambling and how to win more money. And it actually got to the point where in my clouded brain, it had become my solution to my problems. You know, I had gotten so deep into debt that in my mind, the only way I was going to get out of that was to keep gambling and win more money.
How did this, I'm sure you weren't always a gambler. How did it start?
Right. And so it starts like anything, you know, it's innocent enough. You know, for me, I started gambling, you know, like you mentioned, right around 2000, 2001 with friends. And it was, you know, maybe $50 or $100 on a football game or a basketball game. And I didn't see the dangers. I didn't know what could happen if I felt. I didn't even know gambling addiction was a thing, really, to be honest with you. And so, we hear so much about drug addiction and alcoholism, which we should. And our parents raise us to be aware of the dangers when it comes to drugs and alcohol, but we don't talk about gambling addiction. And so for me, it started, like I say, innocently enough. And then, there was no shut off valve for me. You know what I mean? When it comes to gambling, like my friends could gamble a little bit and stop, and they would have maybe $100 that they would gamble with, and that was it. Well, for me, if I lost $100 and that's all I had, I would have to find more money. And so $100, then it progresses to $1,000 a game. And then eventually over the course of time, it builds, you know what I mean? And so it's a gradual process. And for the addict, we don't always recognize what's happening to us while we're in that, in our addiction.
Now, were you working while doing this, or?
Sure. And so I worked during my college years. And after that, I was working, I had a few different jobs, but this started, when my gambling really started to progress. I actually was working for myself as a contractor. And so, which was not good, because I was accepting large sums of money from customers, to do projects. I was a general contractor. And so, I would do $50,000, $100,000 jobs. And, to the gambling addict, when somebody hands a gambling addict a $25,000 deposit check, that's a challenge, and as I mentioned, as I started to exhaust all of my other avenues and resources to get money, I started in my own head justifying taking money that was given to me by a client to do a job and using that for gambling purposes. Because in my mind, the addict's mind, we can rationalize any sort of decision, and choice we make. Well, I'm just going to borrow this money, but I'll just win more, and then I'll be able to do the job, and then also pay some other people off. And that's the brain, where that's the sickness of addiction. The brain is a powerful instrument. And so that's kind of how it went, early, towards kind of the middle to late early 2000s, is when I was working for myself.
Wow. So you took the money from, these clients. Were you able to actually do what they needed, or that all fell apart?
To a certain extent, but what would happen is, and my intentions were always the best. I did not take money from a customer with the idea that I was just going to hit the road and gamble with it and never come back. I would actually, for example, take a $30,000 deposit check, and I would take maybe $15,000 or $20,000 of that and put that towards my gambling addiction. And then I would take the other 10,000 and actually start the project, so I would make an effort. And then inevitably, every single time, what would happen is that I would get a week or two into this project and I'd be out of money. And then the customer or the client is looking at me like, what's going on? And then I had all of these stall tactics and diversions and excuses and things like that. And I could usually make that last for 2 to 3 weeks before finally the customer would recognize, hey, something's not right here. And then they would get the state involved and law enforcement involved. And that's really how that process went.
Wow. So let me ask you, how was it? Now, you said you gambled for quite many years. How long were you married? And did your wife know that you were doing this, or she had no clue?
Right. And that's a great question, because again, and it's so convoluted and so, it just to the outsider, oftentimes I tell this story and it just doesn't make sense to them. But what happens is, again, gambling addiction is it's easy to hide. Like if I were a drug addict, my wife would probably be able to look at me and recognize it, say, hey, we need to get you some help. She didn't see anything on me physically. Obviously, she knew that there were problems financially, and we got married in 2006. And so as we started to, right around maybe say 2010, 2011 is when things really got bad. And I was in charge of all the bills. And so I would I would, instead of paying the bills, I was gambling with that money, and my wife would get phone calls, or I would get phone calls, or we'd get something in the mail, and she would ask me about it. And I would just, I would spin the truth. Basically, I would lie to my wife each and every day. I would tell her, I would make up some excuse. Well, I'll take care of it. I'm not sure why this is going on, but I'll find out and I'll take care of it. And a lot of times the tendency is, if you're the spouse of the addict, you don't want to believe what you don't want to believe what is staring you in the face. Basically, it's hard. The tendency is to not believe what you don't want to. And so from the outside, from the periphery, friends and family members were saying things to my wife that they recognized that things were not right, something was wrong, but she couldn't pinpoint it, because again, I had a story and I had an excuse for everything. I hadn't paid the mortgage for 8 months, and then we were served with, foreclosure papers. And that's about the point where things, really started to go sideways, but she couldn't pinpoint what the root of the problem was.
Did you finally tell her, or how did she find out?
So what happened was, in early 2015, I had sent an email to a family member asking for a $30,000 loan, I think it was, and also in that email, I mentioned that I had some gambling debts to pay off. And I think for me, that was my cry for help, maybe, because I didn't have the courage to come right out with it to my wife or anybody else. Maybe in a weird sort of way, that was my cry for help, hoping that my family member would take the initiative to get involved. And so anyway, that's sort of what happened. And my wife found out, and her parents found out, and literally within 2 days, they had set up an intervention, not knowing the full extent at all of what had been going on for the last 15, since we were married, it would have been 10 years, but they had no idea of the extent of the damage yet. But they knew that I had a gambling problem, and all of these things that were going on, it sort of kind of lined up and made sense to them. And so that's kind of how that happened.
So how much money do you think you lost or gambled away,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was, over $1 million in debt at the time, by 2015. And to be honest with you, I didn't know I was that far into debt. It took me a while to kind of sort through the carnage and figure out how much I owed. And it was, it was over $1 million. We lost our house. I owed money to customers, and like I said, clients and friends and family members and everybody I knew, basically.
So do you think that was actually the rock bottom of it all? Were you able to then understand you had this challenge and you needed to get out from under it?
So I'll tell you, that the intervention, they put this intervention together. And again, it's like you see on TV, you walk into this room. I was led into this room and by my father-in-law, thinking we were just going to have a conversation. And there's family members sitting there, and then a strange person that I've never met before, was the interventionist. And so, they just presented it to me as an ultimatum. Basically, here's what we have: a place for you to go to get treatment. It was in Minnesota, and you can choose this lifeline, so to speak. But if you don't, we're gone, every single one of us. And my wife even said as much too. She was a mess at that point, but she said, "Look, if you don't take this opportunity, I'm out of here." And so I was relieved, to be honest with you, because I had been living a lie for so long, and that is no way to live. Walking into the house every night and sitting down at the dinner table with my wife and son, and lying to them every day was soul crushing. But I kept doing it because I was so sick, but so anyway, to be honest, it was a relief, when I finally was sent off to treatment. But that wasn't quite my rock bottom. That would come a little bit later.
Really? So then you went for treatment, and how is that working out for you?
Well, great.
What?
Basically what happened was, and again, I didn't know anything about gambling addiction. I knew I had a problem, but I had no idea how the brain works, how the dopamine in the brain affects your decision making, and why I had done all the things I had done. So when I went to treatment, it was only 30 days, but it was 30 days of sitting down with professionals who specialize in gambling addiction. And I was educated on it, and I left there with some tools basically to go forward. I was not nearly ready to jump back into life and just resume life as if nothing happened. And so what did happen, and this was fortunate for me looking back on it, 3 weeks after I got home from treatment, I had to go before a judge for my sentencing for these crimes I had committed to feed my addiction. The legal process had been going on for a while.
Oh,
And
okay.
my sentencing date, interestingly enough, was 3 weeks after I got back from treatment. And so I went in and stood before the judge, and had to listen to client after client after client stand up and say the most horrible things to the judge about me. And they had every right to do so, because all they knew of me was that I took their money and didn't do the job. So I don't blame them one bit. And the judge looked at me and she said, "You're going to jail right now today." And so then I had the time. I spent 4 months in jail, but that allowed me the time to actually process what I had learned in treatment, and figure out a way to move forward when I finally left jail. And so that was my rock bottom in jail, but that was also my turning point. I needed that time to kind of sort through how I was going to live my life going forward.
Were you able to eventually pay back this money that you took from these people?
I have paid back just about all of it, at this point. And that is something that some of it was court ordered. I was, I was basically, if I didn't, I could be sent back to jail and or prison. Some of it wasn't court ordered, but I paid it back anyway, because that's how I do things now. I've probably paid back 85-90% of all the money I owed, and I still owe a little bit. And some of that is to family members, and I still pay them back on a regular basis, but it's fulfilling to me to know that I've gotten to the point where I'm at now, just by kind of putting my head down and doing the work, and over time things kind of fall into place. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, so I've paid back most of it.
Wow. So now that you've been through treatment, and I'm sure you're not going to do this again, that's for sure, go out and do something crazy like that. What do you think, for people maybe listening that don't know that maybe there is an addiction, a gambling addiction with their loved ones or family member or friend, what would be some of the signs that they can look for to suspect that maybe somebody has a challenge like that?
Sure. That's a great question. Because there are no outward physical signs on a gambling addict, things to look for, obviously, it all comes down to money with a gambling addict. And so obviously the financials, if you have questions and things aren't adding up with, if you're just a friend or an acquaintance or a distant family member, maybe you're not seeing that. But obviously if you're a spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend, and you're working together as a team, if there are things going on in your finances that aren't adding up, demand proof, demand answers. If that's, in addition to that, irrational behavior, erratic behavior. That's the one thing with gambling addicts is we are up and down. We may not
Okay.
show the physical effects, like I said, with a drug addict or alcoholic, but our behaviors are up and down. When I would win a big bet, if I won $10,000 or $15,000, I was on cloud nine and I was the greatest guy to be around. If I had just lost the mortgage payment, and I'm sitting next to my wife and she doesn't know that we just lost the mortgage payment because I'm living a lie and a secret, my behaviors would change. I would get quiet and disengaged, so it's things like that to look for: erratic behavior, quick mood swings, things like that are telltale signs of a problem. And for me, that problem was a big time gambling addiction.
So now, how long since your treatment, how long have you been clean of this?
So it's been a little over 7 years, and one thing about, when I got out of treatment, one thing that addicts deal with is, and we've all heard it, is there's a lot of shame and there's a lot of guilt and there's a stigma that surrounds addiction. And especially so with gambling addiction. But when I got out of treatment, I spent probably the first year or two still living in that shame and guilt and afraid to kind of go out in public for fear of running into somebody. And geez, what if I run into a person that I harmed or lied to or took money from or something like that. But then I crossed that hurdle, and ever since then I've taken pride in my recovery. It's not something I'm ashamed of. It's not something I'm embarrassed about. Obviously I talk about it, and I talk about it because early on in my recovery, I was able to help some people that were at their bottom, and for somebody that like me that took from people for so many years and did the things that I did to feed my addiction. I spent many years taking from people. Now I have the opportunity to give back and help. And so for somebody like me, that's a big deal. And so that further solidified my belief in my recovery. And because of that, it's why I take pride in living a life of recovery. But having said that, I'm not one to get overconfident or get over my skis. I still say this to myself every day. I have a relapse in me. I just don't have another recovery in me. And so this is it. This is my recovery. I don't get another one, And so with the tools I have and the knowledge I have, if I ever get, the urge to gamble or thoughts of that, I have ways to snap out of that and get myself back into a safe place, which is, where I need to stay to keep living a clean, healthy life.
Now, with all that's happening, does your wife take control now of all the finances, or
she does? Yeah, she does. And that's another really good question because, obviously early on, I wasn't even, she wouldn't even, it was probably close to a year before I was even back in the house with her. I had to prove myself. I was living with a recovered addict, just getting myself grounded, and I had to prove myself and build that trust. But yes, she did. She took over the finances. We're at a point now, though, 7 years later, where we have full transparency with everything, with all of our bills and work, and she knows where I'm at and what I'm doing and who I'm with, and we just have a really transparent way of living now that was not there, obviously, during my gambling days. But she does handle most of that, and I'm okay with it. I don't, it doesn't make me feel any less of a husband. I go to work every day and provide for my family, as does my wife. And we just have a really good setup now.
Are you still a contractor?
No,
Or okay.
no, I am not a contractor anymore.
I was curious if you still are.
No, no, I don't. I'm not. Landscape designer now, and I work for a really good company out here, and love what I do. Love what I do, and I get to be outside, which is what I love, and I'm around plants and trees and working with people, and it's a lot of fun. But No, the days of working for myself, I think, are over.
Over. Yeah, sometimes that is a wake-up call, you could say.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And it just,
Mhm,
when I was working for it just brings back such bad, dark
mhm.
memories of that
Yeah.
period of time where I was working for myself, and every day I left the house, and you know, from the time I left the house until the time I got home, all I was doing was trying to hustle money, and convince people to trust me to do the job so that I can get a check so that I can gamble. And it's just a real sick way of living. And so that just, it brings me back to the dark days. And
The dark
I wouldn't
days.
want to do that.
Wow, and so she took you back. She
She did. And, it wasn't, I mean, again, it wasn't immediate. It took a
Mhm.
long time. Once that trust is broken,
So yeah.
and we still work on it,
Mm.
7 years later. It's not like we're perfect now. I mean, we still, and I still have some ingrained behaviors in me that pop out from time to time from all those years of hiding and lying,
Mhm.
and it's not because I'm trying to hide or lie anything now. It's just, it's kind of almost a default mechanism that comes out every once in a while. But we have trust now. There's like I said, full transparency. And she
Mhm.
took me back, and we had one son at the time, when this was going on back in 2015. We had a 5-year-old son, and we actually have a second son now who wouldn't
Mm.
even be on this earth if not for my recovery and my wife's belief in me. And so, in a funny, sick, twisted sort of way, I'm happy that this all happened, because it's
Yeah.
I'm the person now that I believe I always should have been, but clearly wasn't. And my wife has a husband, and my kids have a father now that they deserve.
Yeah, they can trust and know that I always say, your word is who you are.
Your word is
So,
who you are. That's
mhm,
interesting that you say that, because
mhm.
and my father-in-law, and I think he said this to me. I think it was at the intervention we had for me in 2015. He said, "Look, for years, all I had was your word, and my word was no good anymore. It meant nothing. Our words mean nothing, as addicts, after we've lied to our family and friends for so many years." And so, um, you're right, building that trust and rebuilding our foundation it's pretty rewarding for me.
So now that everything is, so it's finally good for you, what are you doing now to help those that suffer maybe with this addiction? Are you helping other people, or um, doing workshops, or what exactly are you doing now?
Sure. So I just, you mentioned earlier, I just finished a book, and that'll be out sometime, hopefully this fall.
Oh, okay.
I travel around, and I go to, I'll visit treatment centers that specialize in gambling addiction treatment. And I'll meet with patients, and I will go to schools, and talk with students, especially, I'm going to do more of this as moving forward, college students, and just educate them and raise awareness about something that a lot of people don't recognize, and we don't talk about in this country. 6% of college students already have gambling addictions, and that's a
Oh,
staggering number, because it's only going to get worse, and there's not enough education, not enough awareness about this addiction, because it's always, gambling a lot of times is portrayed as something that's fun, and
mm,
you know what you don't see is the dark side of it. And so what I do is I travel around, I try and raise awareness and share my story a little bit, in hopes it'll shed a little light on something that they otherwise wouldn't know about.
yeah, because they do think it's fun. Like they go to a casino and, gamble, and then, it's like anything else. After a while, if you don't have that control to stop, I could see where it can lead to being completely out of control.
Right, and that's what you don't see. You see all these
Mhm.
advertisements on TV about sports gambling, and everything else, and it's always portrayed as fun and harmless. Well,
Fun.
they don't show the reality of it. You don't see the reality of it. The reality of it is, like you just said, it's the mom or the dad going to the casino with their 2-year-old child in the car, leaving the child in the car while they sit in the casino for 7 or 8 hours gambling. That's the reality. And that's what happens to a lot of people that gamble. They get sucked in. And I recognize that a lot of people can gamble responsibly. And I'm not talking about or to those people. But a lot of people, just like drugs and alcohol, can't. And so as long as we let our kids know and educate them when they're younger about the dangers of gambling, they will be better prepared going forward as they, get into college and start raising families and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because it's truly it's a bad addiction.
It's insidious. Like I said,
Yeah.
it sneaks up on you. You don't recognize it while it's happening. And a lot of times, by the time it's exposed, like in my case, a lot of times it's too late, because the gambling addict, the suicide rate for gambling addicts is 15 times higher than any of those other addictions. 1 in 5 gambling addicts will attempt suicide. And it's because of all the financial damage that we do, and so that's why it's scary.
Did you ever want to do that to yourself because of your situation?
I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, I was to the point where I was trying in my mind to try and figure out ways to kill myself. But I wanted to, if I was going to do it in a way that, looked like an accident, so that my wife could collect on the life insurance. Right. And so those were the thoughts that were starting to go through my head towards the very end. Fortunately, I didn't get to that point, but that's where this ultimately leads. It's either, the three endings for a gambling addict are prison, insanity, and death. And well, I reached jail, and I actually reached insanity too, but I didn't get to death, and I'm thankful for that, because that's where this goes. And so, again, it's just about making people aware of that.
Thank God you had a family that wanted to see you get out of this situation.
Right. And they were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were amazing, and it was not easy on them. It was extremely hard on them. All of the financial damage I did to my wife and her parents and her sister, they were heavily involved with getting me off to treatment, all the while extremely angry and upset at me for what I had done. And that didn't just go away overnight. While I was in treatment, they spent hours, days, and weeks and months sorting through the carnage, and this went on for the first 10 years of our marriage. So you can imagine the amount of damage I did in 10 years, and so, yeah, there was a lot of anger there, but they still, they helped me, and they sent me on my way to get better. And that's where I'm at now.
Did she need some help also, your wife?
Absolutely. Yeah. She was, she had PTSD through all of this, and she immediately got help. She's been seeing a therapist ever since, as have I, that specializes with gambling addiction and that sort of thing. But yeah, she went through a lot, and she had to hire 3 different attorneys while I was in jail. One, a financial attorney, a divorce attorney, and a criminal defense attorney, because she had people coming after her that she knew nothing, because of all the things I had done. And as a married couple, you're a unit. And so she was concerned about, criminal implications for her, even though she didn't do anything wrong, but because I involved her, and all these other things. So yeah, she did. She went through a lot, and she's come a long way. And, she's been an amazing wife and supporter of me this whole time.
And what, your children, are they okay? Do they know anything about this, or you've kept it from them, especially the older one?
Right. So my youngest one is only 4 now, so obviously he knows nothing, but
right.
He will at some point. Our oldest just turned 13, and we actually just sat him down a couple months ago. We wanted to wait until he was old enough to kind of try and comprehend some of this, and that was a conversation that I had long dreaded. I did not want to have that conversation with my son, but we had to. There was no, the worst thing we could do is to keep that from him and have him find out about this some other way and put him in a really bad spot. And so, sure, we sat him down and just leveled with him. You know, your dad went to jail and your dad was really sick with a bad addiction. And this is what happened. And we've been open in our family about talking about addiction for years, ever since this happened. And so what we tell our son is that there are really good people that make bad choices and bad decisions when they're sick with addiction, you know. And so that's how it went with us.
And he understood to the best he could.
Yeah, I mean, he cried, you know. It was sad for him, but he's good now, and we're open, you know. We're totally open about it. We always talk to him, my wife and I, say, hey, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We're an open book in this family, you know. And so yeah, it was a difficult conversation, but a necessary one. And moving forward, it's only going to help him, you know, down the road, knowing what, you know, what addiction is and what it did to his dad, and the choices we make as addicts that affect everyone around us.
Without a doubt. So now you mentioned that you're writing a book.
Just finished. Yeah, that'll be out hopefully this fall, we're hoping, and if not sooner.
Do you have a title?
Yeah, I do. It's Shambles is the title.
Oh, Shambles.
Shambles, because that's what my life had become.
Yeah.
That's what my life had become. My life was in shambles, you know, and everything around me was in shambles. And so that's what that is. And then I'll be doing, coming up in October, I'll be giving a TED talk. And so I'm looking forward to that, you know.
Well, where are you doing that?
This one. That's going to be in Spokane, Eastern Washington.
Okay, Washington.
Yeah.
Good. That's what you need to do, because people do not understand the consequences of some addictions. And,
right. They don't understand it because they've never been around it or ever seen it, you know. And that goes back to some of the stigma too, you know. There's a stigma because a lot of people look at especially gambling addiction as just a choice, you know. Well, just stop doing it, you know. Well, if you've ever experienced addiction, or you know anything about addiction, it's not you tell an addict just to stop doing something. That's not necessarily how it works.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work, you know, on you know, going to a center and a treatment and finally getting the head in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Because really it's the mind that needs to actually clear itself and heal.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And for me, my mind was so cloudy and foggy for so many years, and to actually have clarity now is a great feeling.
So you're doing TED Talks. So what else are you looking to you know, once your book is out, you know, that'll be, I'm sure, you know, an eye opener for a lot of people. So besides the TED Talks, you said you're going to colleges and trying to get people to understand?
Yeah, and that's the plan going forward, is just to focus on the younger people, you know, because that's where it all starts. You know, addiction starts in the teenage and early 20s. Teenage years and early 20s is oftentimes when addiction starts. And so I want to get to the younger people, you know, and educate them, you know, about the dangers of gambling, because now it's everywhere, you know, and it's so much more accessible. All these different apps we have on our phones, and ways that people can gamble now. And, you know, there are just so many different avenues and ways to do it now. And it's like a lot of things in life, you know, there are so many dangers out there and pitfalls and things that I didn't necessarily have to deal with when I was a kid, but our kids do. And so that's what I'm focused on, is just reaching the younger crowd.
Yeah, it's not just the gambling. I mean, it's the phone addiction, the social media. I mean, TikTok, it's everywhere.
Oh, it is. It's all over the place. is,
It's all
and
over the
it's,
place.
yeah, and it's not going to stop. And so as long as we educate, as long as we raise awareness, which is what I'm about, I'm not about preaching to kids. I'm not about preaching to people. You can't do this. You can't do this because of what happened to me. That's not how I live my life. But what I want to do is share my story and help people understand what can happen if we're not aware and if we're not careful.
Without a doubt. Oh, well, I tell you, you're very courageous. Your wife's courageous. You've all of you've been through some battle, but you've made the choice to heal and to move forward. And for that, I commend the whole family and everyone for seeing that, for actually taking control. I mean, they could have just thrown you, out to pasture, you could say, to the curb, but instead they put you in a treatment center. And that just shows the caring, on their side for you.
They're amazing people. I have incredible
Mhm.
people around me. The friends that stuck by us during that time, and not
Mhm.
all of them did, right? I mean, that's one thing we've all heard it said before. You find out who your true friends are
Mhm.
at your worst moment during times of adversity. And truer words have never been spoken, because I had many friends that really weren't true friends. They bailed, and that was okay. I mean, that's just part of the deal. But the friends that stuck by me and our family, we're a big team.
Oh yeah.
We communicate about all sorts of things, and we have open conversations about all sorts of things now that through this process we've all learned, and it's going to help us all in our family and how we raise our kids and that sort of thing. So I'm very grateful for those people.
And such a challenging, difficult journey ended up being a beautiful journey. It's a journey of healing.
It is
Mhm.
healing, and it's going to help me be a better father in how I raise my sons. Just the conversations I'm able to have with them now, not even just about me, but just life in general. I wouldn't have been capable of that if not for this experience that I went through. And so, like I said, I'm grateful for all those bad days, because it's helped shape me into the person I am today, and
Yeah,
it's a lot of
today.
fun.
Yeah, wow, it's a beautiful thing. So I commend you. You know, you
Thank you.
you healed, and the journey was challenging, but you got through it. So, and that
With a
shows
lot of
that,
help.
yeah, that's all the strength and determination and your family truly loving you, which that in itself is, you know, what else can you ask for? Was for that love and understanding.
Right. I had no right to ask anybody for anything, but they extended that to me.
Mhm.
They never left me. They said from day one, look, we're upset, we're angry, but we are here for you. We
Good
will
to
we will
hear.
we will be here for you as long as you hold up your end of the deal here. And so far, thankfully, I have, and we're a
Yeah.
we're a we're a big team.
Oh, thank God for that. Believe me.
Yeah.
So where can my listeners get a hold of you if they want to know more about this and eventually, your book and anything else that you're doing?
Right now, the best way is Twitter. It's at Patrick Chester 9. The number 9 is my Twitter. And then my email or my website is patrickchester.com. Between those two, I'll have information on my book and where I'll be speaking next, and all of those sorts of things. And so, and also too, if people have questions about this or concerns about a family member or a friend that they think may be involved with gambling, they can reach out to me, and I'm an open book. Like I said, I'm happy to talk to anybody and give them any sort of information I can to help them.
Well, I thank you so much for taking this time out to be on my show. And I know it was a challenging subject to talk about, especially because it's a personal, challenge to you. But thank you for being so courageous and helping others see that, they if they want to get help, they can.
Well, absolutely. There's always, I always like to let people know that there are avenues to get help. It may seem dark if you're
Mhm.
in the throes of addiction, and it may seem like there's no way out, but the suicide prevention line is a big deal. you know, NA, GA, AA, all these different organizations and groups are out there for you. You know, so there is help. You just need to say something. If you feel like you're struggling with something, just say something to whether it's a stranger or a friend, say something, because the longer it goes on, the more it progresses, the more the damage, you know. And
Oh, I
so
know.
that's just how it goes. And I'm, like I said, I'm grateful. And Barbara, I really appreciate you having me on your show.
Well, I appreciate you just being courageous enough to talk about this and, about your personal life and everything. And I wish you all the, best of luck and health and happiness and peace and everything else, and the same to your family. They did an amazing job, of showing the love and the caring for you. So that in itself is half the battle.
Well, thank you so much. Really
Uh,
appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And, thank you to my listeners for listening today. And again, a big thank you to Patrick Chester. And I hope what you heard is what you needed to hear today. So visit me at motivateyourlife.net, and please subscribe to this YouTube channel, The Spiritual Warrior Coach. We're on Spotify, Apple, Chrome, Amazon, International. We're everywhere. And believe me, just listening to some of, if anyone has a problem with gambling or addiction, please get a hold of, Patrick Chester, because I'm sure he has a lot to offer to give you to help you through these challenging times. And also, for those of you maybe interested in learning energy healing, check out my book, Gentle Energy Touch, The Beginner's Guide to Hands-on Healing, on Amazon. So again, thank you so much for listening today, and have a beautiful week filled with love and with light. Love, Barbara.